Yes, my name is, yep, let's see, what to say? Okay, I'm Jen Sawyer. I am the Ag and Natural Resources Program Associate for Commercial Agriculture at the Rutgers Cooperative Extension for Cape May County. I've been a beekeeper since 2011. I am a member of the Jersey Cape Beekeepers Association, which is the local branch of the New Jersey Beekeepers Association. I took training classes there. I also helped teach some of those classes. And at one point, I think I was the third vice president for a year. And that's me tending to one of my hives. So a little bit about bees and pollinators in general, even though our focus tonight is going to be the European honeybee. So the European honeybee versus other bees, they are non-natives. They were brought over by the Europeans. They become a naturalized species. As far as native bees, there are over 4,000 species in the US. There are many other native pollinators. Butterflies alone, there's more than 700 species just in North America. Then we have wasps and flies, hummingbirds, bats, and moths. All of them do a certain amount of pollination. So the European honeybee, there are 3 castes of bees in a colony. The drones, which are the males. The queen, there's only one per colony. And then there are the worker bees, which are the majority of the bees in the hive, and they are all female. Now, the queen bee is the only female with a fully functioning reproductive system. She has a much longer and narrower body. As you can see, her abdomen is very elongated, and she has this very shiny bald spot on her thorax, which you can't quite see here. A queen can live for 2 to 5 years. Some can live a bit longer. Some beekeepers will change out their queens every year or two. For a queen to develop, it takes her 16 days to develop from an egg until she emerges as a fully developed queen. So the first days 1 through 3, she is an egg. Worker bees will decide to pick one of those eggs in that 1 to 3 day range, and they will put it in a special shaped cell. And then from days 4 to 8, they will feed her royal jelly, which is a substance that comes out of glands in the top of the worker bee's head. And then from days 9 through 15, they will cap off the queen cell where she develops. And at day 16, the queen will emerge from that cell. So the role of the queen, and here you can see, this is the queen here, and you can see her very bald thorax, and these are her attendants. There's usually anywhere from like 4 to 6 bees that are in attendance of the queen at all times. So when a queen emerges, she'll spend several days in the hive acclimating herself, and then she needs to mate in order to produce more worker bees. So she'll take what we call as a mating flight. Sometimes they'll take more than one, where they will seek out a drone cloud. So there are just kind of certain areas about 125 feet up in the air where drones are just kind of hanging out. She'll mate with up to several. And when she has been fully mated, she will return to the hive, where her primary role becomes to lay eggs all day. So she can lay up to 1,200 eggs per day. There will only be one queen per hive. She does have a smooth stinger, which enables her to sting repeatedly. So if the colony has decided that their current queen is no longer doing a good job, maybe she's just getting older, she's not laying enough eggs, or maybe the hive or the colony is outgrowing the hive space and they need to swarm, they're going to start several queen cells. And then the first queen that emerges, if there's 3 or 4 capped queen cells, the first queen that emerges will go through and sting all of the other queen cells to kill the other developing queens. If two queens emerge simultaneously, they will find each other and fight to the death because they only have room for one queen per colony. So this is a really great photo where you can see there's two capped queen cells. And, you know, just like the queen herself, it's a very long, narrow cell, kind of reminds me a little bit of a peanut. And then this is a queen cup. Now this is where the worker bees will put a 1 to 3 day old egg. And as it starts to develop into a larva, we'll start feeding it royal jelly. And then when it hits that certain stage, they will they'll start building the wax out and then finally put a cap on the end. And here's a good picture of a drone. You can see how different he looks from a worker. So when a beekeeper inspects their hives, they're going to find several of these queen cups. They're just kind of those just in case cells. They'll be kind of everywhere, anywhere within the hive on the frames. You know, so they're just always kind of prepared, because if something happens to their queen, you know, sometimes accidentally, we try not to squish too many of our bees, but sometimes we may, what we call roll the queen. We roll her between two frames when we're doing inspections, and you know, sometimes we accidentally may kill her or squish her. So the workers are always very prepared. They have these special cells just sitting and waiting. So the workers, they are all females. They are all daughters of the queen. They have a non-functioning reproductive system, and they can only sting once. They have a barbed stinger that will remain in whatever they sting. And then with that, when they pull away, there's a venom sac and part of her intestines that will come out, and that causes her death. Sometimes they die immediately. Sometimes it takes, you know, a minute or two. So bees are really going to use that stinger as their absolute last resort. You know, if they feel that you're an imminent threat, such, you know, usually that's a beekeeper, because we're going in and we're inspecting and pulling their, you know, their houses apart. You know, so they get pretty defensive of their hives. Just, you know, think about if somebody came into your house and started rearranging your furniture while you're trying to, you know, do stuff. If you had a stinger, you'd probably want to sting them too. But when a worker bee is out in the garden, she is so focused on looking for nectar and gathering nectar and pollen. She really doesn't care that you're there, as long as you don't swat at them, or, you know, if, you know, sometimes if they're on clover in the lawn, you know, if you step on one, then, you know, that's going to trigger her to want to sting, because that's her imminent death is coming. But most of the time when they're in the gardens, they're heading to the flower, getting what they need, heading to another flower, getting what they need. Once their pollen pockets, which you can see here, this is pollen that she has cleaned off of herself. The pollen will stick to the hairs on their body, and they will clean it and then pack it onto their hind legs. And then once their honey stomach is full of nectar, they will head back to the hive. So now a worker bee takes a little bit longer than a queen to develop. It takes 21 days for a worker to hatch out. So again, it's, you know, 1 to 3 days is an egg, 4 to 9 days is larva, where other bees will be feeding the larva, and then they cap off the cell, and they spend the next 10 to 11 days developing under that wax cap. And when it's time for the fully developed worker to emerge, she will start to chew away at the wax cap and will emerge at roughly day 20 to 21. As soon as the worker comes out of her cell, she has a job, and her job starts as a housekeeper. When they emerge, they will turn right around, they will clean out their cell that they developed in, to make sure it's clean and ready. So as the queen is coming along, she can deposit an egg. Now they have very short lives, especially during the spring and summer into fall. Their average lifespan is 42 to 45 days. And so after they clean their cell, they'll start going around the hive cleaning other cells, either to prepare it for an egg to be laid, or for honey storage, or for pollen storage. Then when they're between 3 and 16 days old, they become undertakers. They're going to remove any dead or almost dead bees from the hive. You'll see them, they will drag them out the hive entrance and drag them away from the hive and deposit them somewhere outside of, a few feet from the hive. In that same time period, they can also be a nurse bee. The nurse bees are taking care of the eggs and the larva, making sure the larva is fed. Queen's attendants. The queen has, 4 to 6 attendants that follow her around all the time. They're cleaning her, they're feeding her, they take away her fecal matter, because her only job is to lay eggs. So the attendants will take care of everything else. They move on to fanning when they're 12 to 18 days old. And what fanning does, so they're fanning their wings to help regulate the internal temperature of the hive, they like to keep it at about 90 degrees. It's also, so it promotes airflow. So they will position themselves throughout the hive to kind of get this airflow going. They also will fan honey before it's capped off to help reduce the moisture content. And they will also fan to spread the queen's pheromones. You see that a lot after a swarm is captured. If the queen is in the hive box or the hive body that the beekeeper has captured the swarm in, and there are still some bees on the outside, you'll see bees at the entrance that are fanning. They're facing into the hive, and they're fanning out that pheromone, so that the other bees from the swarm that are just kind of flying around loosey-goosey will pick up that scent and know that, hey, our queen, we're moving in here, so this is where you need to go. And then they will just start filing right into the hive. And also around that same time, they begin wax building. Now, the wax is produced from glands under their legs, and it's just like one little tiny wax flake. So they will pick off the wax flake, they chew them together to make a bigger piece of wax, and they use that for building new comb, to repair damaged comb. They use it for capping off honey and brood. Then they begin guarding. Guarding is very important. The colony does not like intruders. They will fight off wasps, other types of bees, other types of insects, skunks, whatever's trying to get into the hive that doesn't belong there. However, if there is a lost honeybee that does not belong to their hive, but maybe got a little windy and she landed on the little landing pad of, the next hive over, if she is carrying a lot of nectar and pollen, the guard bees will be like, oh, come on in. They let her deposit whatever she's brought back, and they're like, okay, see you later. Now, if she is trying to get in and she has nothing with her, they are going to sting her and get rid of her. Now, the last 3 weeks of the worker bee's life is spent as a forager. So they are foraging for nectar and pollen. One worker bee can produce about 1.5 teaspoons of honey in her lifetime. So just over that last 3 week span, she can produce up to 1.5 teaspoons. In order for bees to produce just 1 pound of honey, they must visit about 2 million flowers. A worker might visit 50 to 100 flowers in one trip, and they will typically fly about 3 miles, like in a 3-mile radius from their hive colony. If the food source is really, really, really heavy and good, they will fly up to 5-mile radius. But typically it's about 3 miles. And then there's the drone. The drone is a male. They have a very plug-shaped body, and they do not have a stinger. They take 24 days. They take the longest. they do the least. And when a queen is depositing eggs, the size of the cell determines what type of egg she lays. The smaller cells she'll deposit a fertilized egg, and that turns into a worker. And then there's a slightly larger diameter cell that she will deposit an unfertilized egg, and that becomes the drone. So they don't work other than help with hive temperature regulation. They will fan. Their purpose is to mate with virgin queens, so newly emerged queens that go out on mating flights. That is the job of the drone. They will die after mating, as their parts kind of stay with the queen, and they will drop out of the sky. As winter approaches, usually after the queen has stopped laying, sometime around October-ish, depending on the weather, they start getting kicked out of the hive. They are just physically dragged by workers because they have no desire to feed bees that are not working to help feed the cluster of bees. So in the wintertime, the workers will form this big cluster around the queen to keep her warm and to keep her fed. And, the way they function is if one bee eats, they all eat. If no, and that's how it goes. They don't go off and just eat for themselves. They bring back and feed the whole colony. And then in the springtime, when the food sources are back up and the queen starts laying eggs again, she will start laying new drone eggs and repopulate with drones. So there are 5 races of honeybees. The top 4 are the most common that are found in North America. And each one has been favored for specific qualities. Italians are probably the most common. They are relatively good-natured, they're hygienic, but they do tend to rob other hives. Russians are resistant to varroa and tracheal mites. They overwinter well, but they'll tend to swarm, and they can be expensive. The Carniolan is probably the second most common after the Italian bee. They tend to be pretty gentle. They get started up really well in the spring. They'll forage on cooler and wetter days, but they tend to swarm easily. And Caucasians are good foragers. They're pretty gentle. They don't rob as much, but they're slower to get started in the spring. And the buckfast were developed in the 20th century, and they were developed for their gentleness, their high honey production, their low rate of swarming, but they also tend to rob. A lot of times you can purchase a nucleus colony, which is 5 frames of bees with brood and a mated queen, and you can get all Russian or all Italian, and that is okay. However, if that hive eventually swarms and takes their original queen with them, and their virgin queen comes out, there's no guarantee that she is going to mate with a Russian drone or an Italian drone. So there's always going to be a mixing of the type of bees in your hive. Unless somehow you manage to have the only hive of honeybees in a 5 to 6 mile radius with no chance of your, a requeen, virgin queen mating with a different race. So a little bit about the colony. So the bees will work as a single unit, and a smallish colony has about 20,000 bees. A very strong colony in the middle of the nectar flow, which is right around now when there's a lot of things in bloom, upwards of 50,000 to 60,000 bees. As long as there's room for them, the queen will keep laying, they'll keep producing as long as they can keep themselves fed. And again, those bees all have roles within the hive, but they work as a single unit for the health and safety of the hive. And it's the workers who make the decisions. A lot of people are like, oh, it's good to be the queen. The queen's job is to lay eggs. She makes no decisions. She's just kind of a figurehead. And it's the worker bees who decide, this queen's not doing her job. Her egg laying patterns are spotty. She's getting too old. She's not doing well. They'll also decide that this hive space is too small for us. So this section of the hive, you ladies and gents are going to go with the old queen and go find a new space while we raise a new queen and stay here. All decided by the worker. So again, the workers are foragers. They're collecting nectar and pollen. Nectar is converted to honey, and honey is the carbohydrate source, the carbohydrate in the bee's diet. Pollen is fermented with enzymes that the bees produce to form what we call bee bread. And bee bread is the protein source. So in the spring, the queen will be starting to get fed more protein, and that encourages her to begin laying eggs again. The beeswax that is in a colony, again, comes from glands under the legs, and they use it to cap off honey and larvae. They make burr comb, which is building comb in places it doesn't really belong, or bridge comb to kind of fill in some bigger gaps. As far as communication goes, the field bees, or the forager bees, they communicate with something called the waggle dance. And I highly recommend that you Google the waggle dance and watch some YouTube videos, because it's very, very interesting. It's difficult to explain, but it's exciting to watch. So when a field bee or a forager bee finds a really, really great nectar source, when they return to the hive, they do this waggle dance. So first they'll waggle in a straight line, and that is telling the other bees that it's, as many times as they waggle, it's so many degrees away, from the sun, and indicating the direction and the distance. And then she'll circle to the right. She'll do the waggle again. She'll circle to the left. So she does this little figure 8 dance, waggling the whole time. Other bees will become like, hey, what's going on? And they'll start watching her, and they'll start replicating it so this is how this gets communicated throughout the hive. Like, hey, we're going to go so many clicks northeast, and there's this really great nectar source, and we all need to go there because there's just so much good stuff. Sometimes there are competing waggle dances, and whoever gets the most bees excited and replicating their waggle dance, that will decide which of those 2 really good nectar sources that they will go to. So again, the waggle dance, Google it. If you're really interested, it's a really cool thing to see. So when you're inside the hive, so here's a picture of a frame that's inside of the hive. These caps here, this is capped off brood. So this is worker brood here. And you can see the pollen. there's yellows and oranges and reds, so many different pollen sources. And then that's what is fermented. And they don't cap off the bee bread. That always stays in an open cell. And when I'm saying cell, each one of these little hexagons is a cell. And these smaller cells that are used for storing honey and pollen are the same size as the worker bee will develop in. So now here is a frame that has no capped brood, but you'll notice up at the top here, that is capped off honey. And it kind of has this like dented in darker look. And then just below it here, you can see there's honey or nectar kind of shining in there. And then here's a little bit more of that stored pollen. And then down in this kind of lower quadrant, you can see the different stages of larvae. And they're just these very pearly white little curlicues. So unfortunately, you can't see any cells with eggs. They look like a grain of rice, but smaller. So for a beekeeper, when we're inspecting a hive, what we're really looking for are signs of disease. We're looking for eggs. We're looking for a larva. We want to make sure there's capped brood and see how the food stores are holding up. So here are two more photos. So this is capped worker brood, and you can see it's very uniform. The queen has laid a really good pattern. These empty ones may have just had workers emerge, or maybe there is a little bit of pollen or bee bread in there. This is drone brood. So drones, again, are in larger cells, same little hexagon, but a slightly larger size. And these, as they develop, those cells protrude out from the frames. And they have a convex cap. And they're like very rounded. It always reminds me of pencil erasers. So propolis is another thing you'll find in the hive. And propolis is defined as a sticky resinous material that bees collect from trees and plants. And they use it to seal up cracks and to strengthen comb. So like darker comb usually has, or burr comb will sometimes have a lot of propolis. It has antimicrobial qualities, and we call it bee glue. Basically, our hive boxes where they come together, the bees will glue or propolis all around those edges. It keeps out other insects like ants, things like that. I mean, they still find their way in because ants do that. But it cuts down on drafts. It doesn't, it helps kind of keep things a little more watertight. And it can be, it's very, very sticky, especially in the summer when things are kind of, like on a 95-degree day, it's very gummy. I don't know how else to describe it, but it smells lovely. So bees like their bee space, which is 3/8 of an inch exactly, which was discovered by the Reverend Lorenzo Langstroth back in the mid 1800s. And I'll talk a little bit about him later. And they use the propolis to fill in gaps in the hive. If it's a little bit bigger than 3/8 of an inch, they will put propolis, they'll layer propolis until it gets to 3/8 of an inch. And so if when I put my frames back together, they're not quite matched up or they're spaced out too much, they will fill in that gap until it's 3/8 of an inch. And again, cracks in the hive body. And they stick the frames down. I mean, they make it a little more difficult for us to help kind of take care of them. So honey is also, that's what a lot of people, honeybees, what do you get? Honey. And what is honey? It is the nectar of the gods. It is, it's the most exciting thing in the world for a beekeeper. but actually it is bee vomit. Ew, right? So foragers are collecting nectar in their honey stomach, and then there's enzymes that mix with the nectar to break down the complex sugar, and they invert the sugars. And then the foragers come in and they pass it into a hive bee who's in there working, and they pass it mouth to mouth. And then they further digest it in their honey stomach. They may pass it on to another bee. They may go through several bees before it actually makes it into a cell. Sometimes nectar is stored right away, maybe because of there's evaporation, or it's the right temperature inside the hive, so it doesn't need a whole lot of mixing. It just needs that first bit of enzymatic action from the forager bee. And what they're trying to do is as that inverts into honey, they are trying to get the moisture level down from 70%, which is the water content or the moisture content of the nectar, down to around 20 to 18%. And that's, they really try to get honey to about 18% moisture. And then they'll cap that off with wax to keep any other moisture getting into the honey. So this is my favorite cartoon. I could get lost in your big black eyes, and I swoon at the way your leg hair catches the sunlight. As the saying goes, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. So our main objective really is the health of our colonies. Our other objectives, some people keep bees for the love of bees. They keep bees for pollination services or honey production. I myself, I have a love-hate relationship with my bees. I say that kind of tongue in cheek. I try to help maintain the health of their colony, and sometimes they're not as thankful as I would, or appreciative as I would like them to be. They do just pollinate wherever they can find. I don't do crop pollination. I only have 5 hives. And the benefit is honey production. And basically that gets sold in order to help maintain my bees. There's no profit in small time beekeeping, but it's for the good of the planet. And I do love my bees. So that's why I do it. So as I had said before, the Reverend Langstroth, he had developed this hive body that is the most widely used hive type in North America. Now this is coming, there were several other people that were working on hives with the removable frames. And now this is a big step up from the straw skeps. You still see they're kind of like the dome, they're woven straw rope. Now the problem with those, when you go to harvest honey from a skep, which it is illegal to keep bees in the United States in a skep, because you basically are going to kill off the colony, and you're just going to really destroy everything to get your honey from a skep. So the Reverend Langstroth developed this and discovered bee space. Otherwise, some of the other people that were trying to develop these removable frame hives had their spacing all wrong, and the bees were just propolising everything together, and you just couldn't get anything apart. So this is what commercial keepers use. There are similar versions that are used in the UK. They do use Langstroth or a Warre hive, which has a little bit of a different look to it, or maybe the frames might be shorter or there's less frames. But typically almost all the keepers that I know, we use a 10 frame hive body. And these are the different parts. So there's the hive stand is optional. My hive stand is cinder blocks. There's a bottom board, and this part protrudes out, and there's that 3/8 inch bee space there. So that's kind of the landing strip or the landing pad for the bees coming in and out. And then you have your hive body, which is a deep body. That is where most of the brood is. And then you have your honey super, where the The extra honey is stored in an inner cover and a telescoping outer cover. So the brood box, most of the brood, if you're lucky, which is the eggs all the way up to the capped larva, are found in your brood box. Most of the time that's in the bottom 1 to 2 boxes, depending on how the beekeeper wants to run their hives. Some people run with 2. I like to do two deeps of brood because that gives me more wiggle room if something isn't quite right. And here's another nice little picture of one of my queens. And most of the, out of the 10 frames, most of the time the brood is all found in the middle section. And then as you move to the outer edges of the box, that's where you're going to find all the honey stores and the pollen. Though each frame that has some brood in it is going to have a little bit of honey and pollen for feeding larvae. So what is the purpose of bees? Pollination. That's what they do. That is a side effect of them going and gathering nectar and gathering up pollen. So about 1/3 of the human diet is derived from insect pollinated plants, and up to 80% of that insect pollinated plant matter is due to honeybee pollination. We have monoculture, where single crops are pollinated by commercial keepers, and that's where you get your varietal honeys, such as blueberry honey. So commercial pollination keepers will travel up and down the coast out west, and they will put their colonies down for a few weeks. When the blueberries are in blossom, they'll put new honey supers on, and any honey that's produced while those bees are mainly foraging on just the blueberry or just the citrus or just the butterbean, or just buckwheat, then they pull all that honey off at the end of that pollination job before they move their colonies to the next job. General pollination, that's basically what my bees do. It's just bees on land that travel up a 3-mile radius, and they're foraging on whatever food that they find or that they like. And I was at one of my bee yards from a few years ago. So the bonus of the European honeybee is honey production. They are the only bee that makes excess honey beyond what the colony needs. Now, one hive can produce up to 100 pounds or more, depending on the nectar flow, depending on the size of the colony. Honey has antifungal and antibacterial properties. But a hive, so I can go ahead and collect, whatever is excess, but I have to make sure that I leave enough honey on the hive for the hive to survive the winter. Depending on the size of the hive, they may need anywhere from 60 to 100 pounds of honey to overwinter. Some keepers, depending on the nectar flow, depending on where they're located, I know people that have pulled several hundred pounds of honey off of their hive and still had enough to leave for the bees to overwinter. It's all about location. Other hive products, there's wax. It's used in candle making and lip balms and lotions, furniture polish. This is just mineral oil and wax. This is honeycomb from a swarm. So this is what their natural honeycomb looks like. Other hive products are pollen, which is used by humans as a supplement. There's special traps that you put on your hives that kind of scrape off the pollen from the bees' little pollen pockets. And here's a picture of that gummy propolis, which is used in salves. So the plight of the honeybee, a lot of people ask me about colony collapse disorder, and there's still no definitive cause of that. There are just so many factors that contribute to it, such as pesticides, fungicides, herbicides. There's disease issues. There are pests like the varroa mites, our biggest pest. And the plight of native bees is similar, especially when it comes to pesticides and herbicides and fungicides, because even studies that are being done have been done in the last 8 years or so are showing that even the pollen that they're bringing back is showing not only pesticide, but also herbicide and fungicide residue. And that becomes a problem that they're finding as the pollen is fermented into the bee bread and then fed to the developing bees. There are theories that this is adversely affecting the health of those bees, and they can't forage properly. You know, their little GPS doesn't work. Varroa mites is probably the worst pest of the honeybee. So there's a ballpoint pen. This is a drone larva. And on the end here, that is a varroa mite. And the easiest way to describe it is if you had a basketball-sized tick on you, that's what one varroa mite is to a developing larva. So if you have a real high varroa mite infestation, you will sometimes see bees that have 2 or 3, and they won't live long because the varroa is just kind of like feeding on their juices. There's a couple of diseases that can decimate colonies, such as European foul brood or American foul brood. European foul brood can be treated. American foul brood is very contagious, and we have to kill off our hives and burn everything. And there's a whole thing that we have to go through. So how can we help as humans? We want to plant for pollinators. I did not take that out. Obviously, I've given this talk before. Limit or cease your use of herbicides, fungicides, and insecticides. You know, sometimes it's necessary. Sometimes, you know, sometimes you need to use those things, but the label is the law. If you follow the labeling on your pesticides and you use it at times where it will have time to dry before bees are out foraging, so you're not spraying them directly, that can be of help, even though they are finding there are residues, you know, and it's just because a little is good doesn't mean a lot is better when you're using pesticides. So yes, the label is the law. Use it how it is labeled. If you're not sure, don't use it. If you have professional pesticide applicators that are coming in, if you know, are concerned about the plight of pollinators, you know, make sure that, you know, you're hiring the correct people to spray for you. So we can provide habitat for bees and other pollinators. You can plant for forage. So things that have a aim for having a consistent bloom throughout the season, and aim for plants that have high nectar. There are a lot of things out there that are really pretty that are no good to the bees because they have very little nectar. And if you're so inclined, you can keep bees. So I'm going to talk a little bit about honey, since this is From Hive to Honey, and I have to talk a little bit quicker. So uses of honey, you can just use it straight, eat it with a spoon. I put it in my tea. I also eat it with a spoon. It's great for baking. It's been used on wounds to aid healing for thousands of years. It's added to cosmetics. The different types are single crop, which are your specialty honeys like cranberry honey, blueberry, citrus, orange blossom, buckwheat. There's wildflower honey, which is what I consider mine because I don't know where my bees are foraging. They're not on a single crop. There are infused honeys. Now, an infused honey has something added to it, has an added flavor, which is different from a single crop honey, where that flavor actually is coming from the nectar of the plant. An infused honey has something such as cinnamon or red pepper flakes or garlic added to it. So something that is not already present in the nectar that they were gathering. Creamed honey is when you let honey crystallize with very small crystals. There's a whole way of doing this. Beekeepers take a long time to perfect their own creamed honey, and trying to get the smaller the crystal, the smoother it is, and a really good creamed honey you will not notice the crystals. It'll have like a butter consistency. And then there's comb honey, which a lot of people are nostalgic for. And I do not personally do comb honey because it takes the bees, again, like they only get these little tiny flakes of wax. It takes them so long to develop that comb that I try not to destroy comb. But there are some people that raise and sell comb honey. So you get a chunk of honeycomb filled with honey, usually placed in a jar and then topped up with more honey. So for our area down here in Cape May County, we harvest in mid to late summer, so mid-July into mid-August. And we only take what the bees don't need. We take at least 80% capped frames. So a frame has two sides. Now I use frames that it's a wooden frame with a plastic foundation. They build the wax out on both sides. And both sides have to be at least 80% capped off honey, or I won't take it. That's mainly because the moisture level, there may be some, higher moisture level in there, and I want to try to get a more consistent product. I use a fume board, which is basically a little cap that has a material sided, and I spray it with it's called Bee Quick or BUA, and it smells like almonds. And the top of it is black, so I put it on top of the hive. The sun beats down, vaporizes the spray, that infiltrates through the it makes its way down the hive. The bees don't like the smell of it. It's not toxic to them, the stuff that I use. It doesn't change any flavor of the honey, but after a few minutes they will get out of the honey super box that I'm trying to harvest, which just makes it a lot easier to bring home. So I'm not bringing home tons of bees with me. And then I prep those things for extraction. So I'm going to kind of whip through these because I have 10 minutes left. So honey extracting, I have a little more sophisticated of a setup now. And we use a hot or a cold knife to cut the wax cappings off. This is the extractor here. This one holds 3 frames and it spins, so it's centrifugal force. I had a cappings bin that I kind of rigged up myself. This is my honey collection bucket. I have 2 metal sieves that I strain the honey through. If I did not put it through the sieves, there would be all sorts of bee parts, any larva that was on the bottom of a frame that got spun out, wax, just lots of stuff that you don't want. So I don't say that mine is raw or unfiltered, because if it was completely unfiltered, nobody would buy it, because nobody wants to have like a bee head or bee leg in their honey. So I have these 2 metal mesh strainers that take out the big particles, but it does not trap any of if there's pollen in the honey, it does not filter that out. And then most of the time I use the glass classic clean line jars, and they're 1 pound jars for the most part. So here are some frames. These are beautiful frames of honey. You can see this nice white wax capping. So this is 100% capped off on both sides. And I used to just kind of like take them out of the boxes and stick them in coolers so I could put the lid on and not bring bees home. So this is my little setup. This is my uncapping knife. And basically we just kind of run and take as little of the wax that we can off. And we have to do both sides, and then we put it in the extractor. So here's just the capping draining. I leave the cappings to drain overnight or for two days. I do cover it because honey is oh yes, my brain. It loves water. So it will suck the moisture out of the air, which will change the moisture content of my honey. And I don't want to do that. So I will cover it and let everything kind of drain naturally, as long as it's still kind of warm in the house. And sometimes I can get several more pounds of honey just from the cappings. So there's the extractor, everything is loaded, and you spin. And when one side is empty, you flip the frames the other side and you spin that side of the honey out, and it gathers down in the bottom of the tank. And then we just open up this honey gate. This is my original setup with some store-bought mesh strainers. And again, it's catching any bee parts, wax, and other debris. And so you can see like all the big particles are kind of caught up top, and then it goes through a finer strainer and then into the collection bucket. Now this is extracted honey that I thought was pretty exciting from two hives on the same property, harvested about a month apart, and there was a clear difference in just the color of the honey alone, though the taste was pretty much the same. And the color difference and the taste difference is really due to the type of nectar that they're harvesting at the time. I like this photo. This photo was sent to me by a friend of mine in West Virginia, who my dad goes down there every November, and my friend's like, oh, send honey for me, will you? And he sent me this picture, and he's like, we save the honey, like we save your honey for the good stuff. So like when we have the good biscuits, like that's when we have, you know, we save your honey for that. So it's kind of just, you know, get to know your beekeeper, get to know your local beekeeper. It's always fun to have that support. So some resources, there's a Rutgers fact sheet on blooms for bees, how to provide pollen and nectar sources. One of the books that we decided to use for our JCBA beginner beekeeping course was Beekeeping for Dummies, which I think might be in its 3rd edition now. But it really kind of everything you need to know to get to the point where you're keeping bees. Then there's the New Jersey Beekeepers Association, our local association, and your local beekeeper. So there's me again with inspecting one of my hives. And there is my email address. Feel free to email me any questions if something comes up later. I am just going to put this little resource thing back here, and then Julie, if there's any questions.